Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Clear Your Path podcast. My name is Dan Jakovsky, and today I'm joined by my good friend and guest, Alex Williams. And he's going to come in and tell us all about his stories about letting go, what he does, how he helps people. And we're going to have a good chat, hopefully. Right, Alex?
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely.
Yeah. So Alex, tell our audience a little bit about what you do and who you do it for.
So I am what you could call a resilience coach and speaker. And in a nutshell, I essentially help people to overcome the obstacles that get them in the way of achieving success. And predominantly my work is with Gen Z, because they're it's kind of what I wish I had when I was younger. But I generally talk to any organization really about the topic of resilience. I feel it's a really important topic, but also a topic that probably hasn't been painted in the best light. But actually, when we get to understand what it really is, it's transformational to help us achieve the things we want to in life. And it's really important right now for many people.
Right. Okay. And you gather you're a coach as well. You go into organizations, you're a professional speaker.
Yeah.
And you're quite relatively new on that journey, right?
Yeah, so I got into speaking about 3-4 years ago, but I would only really say the last year I've actually done anything with it, probably because of massive procrastination and having to do a lot of the work to get myself into a position where I was actually good, and also discovering my niche really. I mean, my background is mental health nursing. You know, I've been in mental health since I was about 19 years now.
Oh,
so working
wow.
in a right, yeah,
and
working
so young.
I know, mate. I know. I tell you what. I'll tell you my story in a bit. But if there's one thing I can thank some of my family for, it's definitely the genetics that allow me to look so young.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
People say I look young, and I get that from my mum because she looks really young for her age, and yeah. So
yeah,
it's good to have that, you know.
it's nice when I go out on a night out, and as I'm turning 40 at the end of the year, and you've got people who are like in their late 20s, like older than me, and I'm like unlucky. So I can actually pull it off.
Yeah, so we're going to go more into that, more about what you do, but I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask almost everyone that starts, and the question is, how has letting go impacted your life?
So for me, how it's impacted me is letting go has been probably one of the most transformational things for me, in a sense that it's allowed me to explore those moments in my life, those emotions, those feelings, and actually kind of release some of the emotion and get a more accurate idea of what was going on in those moments. Allow me to release some of that emotions that's been holding me back in my life. You know, for me, dealing with emotions is difficult for many people. In my line of work, essentially a lot of the work I do is emotion regulation, not emotional regulation, which people often call it, but that's, you know, we're not going around emotionally trying to regulate ourselves. We're trying to regulate our emotions. But it makes me laugh. Anyway, that's besides the point. But for me, many of us try to run away. What a lot of emotion regulation is running away from emotions or distracting ourselves. Whereas what letting go has done for me is allowed me to sit with that emotion and kind of support those parts of me that have kind of not held me back, for the sense of like they've also, all those parts have served a purpose. They protected me, but are no longer helping me right now. And it's allowed me to explore that and walk with those parts forward into the future that I now want to create. And it's been the work we've done together has been really transformational, allowing me to do that.
Yeah. So with regards to, you know, if someone's new here and they've never done letting go before, you mentioned sitting with your emotions, and they may think that's the last thing I want to do. Yeah. Why does sitting with your emotions help?
I think when we think of our emotions, especially those moments that kind of, maybe those emotions that trigger us, there's usually kind of what I consider a timestamp on our life when there maybe was a moment or collection of moments where maybe something's happened emotionally for us, and kind of our nervous system and our mind gets stuck in that time. So whenever something represents that, like a snapshot of that in our in our life right now, it'll take us kind of back to that moment or those series of moments. And obviously, like, it's not something you just throw yourself into. If you do struggle with emotional regulation, it's like, it's kind of dipping our toes in is the best way, I think, to approach this sort of stuff, rather than just trying to flood yourself with emotion. But what it does is kind of, when you sit in that moment, and you can manage that discomfort a little bit, because sometimes it can be, you know, upsetting, it can be challenging. It allows us to get, for me, a more accurate story of what actually happened, and allows us to let go of some of those unhelpful stories and emotions we've been holding, that have been holding back. And a really good example of that for me was when we've done some work recently, was there was an event in my life, and it's not massively traumatic, where I was sitting with my dad and my sister, and both really intellectual people. My dad's a solicitor, he's done really well in life. My sister's a double doctor, and there's me, who barely got through school, was basically the one who pissed around all the time and was good at football. And anyway, I remember us having this conversation, and I tried to chip in, and at the time I just got a word wrong, and literally they laughed at me and laughed at me and laughed at me. And I just remember just being really embarrassed and just feeling all this shame. But like, when we were going through kind of exploring things that are holding us back, and one of the fears I've had as a speaker is this fear of not being articulate enough. And I remember, like, we were sitting there doing the letting go, and I just went back to this moment, and I felt like, for some reason, my mind had taken me back there, and I could feel all this emotion. I felt this shame, and I was like, oh God, I just don't want to talk, because people are going to laugh at me. And what actually sitting there with the emotion allowed me to do was actually to realize that, although shame was the initial feeling I felt, underneath that were the more accurate emotions that I needed to process. And that actually being anger. At those people. Like, I was like, oh my God, I felt this anger in me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so angry. But it was like in a good way. I was like, actually, what's the appropriate, people laughing at you for trying to converse with people, anger, that they shouldn't put that shame on me. And I don't think they were doing it on purpose to be horrible, but it was just their reaction. But anger was like, no, really, I should be like saying, F you, that's wrong. Why would you belittle me like that when I'm trying to contribute to that? And it was kind of like,
it's your family, isn't it? So
I know, but letting go in various circumstances in my life, in those snapshots in my life where I felt maybe not, where those parts that have held me back to protect me, I've been able to go back to there and actually sit with them and go, okay, what's actually underneath this? What's going on? And letting go and sitting with that has been able to allow me to let that go and to release some of that emotional tension I found. Now, I know letting go for some might sound a bit new age, and being a mental health nurse, I'm very much, my background being, when I'm working with people, try and use evidence-based stuff. But from a personal perspective, and I believe it can help for lots of people, is being able to sit with that emotion really helps us to get to the truth of what was actually going on, rather than the story we've told ourselves, which is probably maybe holding us back right now.
Yeah, because often the story that we tell ourselves, we add stuff to actually what happened. We add our own interpretation or misinterpretation.
Yeah.
We misinterpret the situation based on our emotional state, and we get upset, and this cycle can continue for years, can't it?
Yeah. And it's really important not to like shame ourselves by, when we misinterpret things. We're not misinterpreting things because we're choosing to misinterpret things. We're all trying to adapt to our environment. Our core, the two primary core drivers as a human is protection and connection. Now, naturally, we seek protection in those we're connected with and in our family environment. So if we're shunned for showing parts of ourselves in those relationships, it's like to stay connected, it's likely that we're going to withdraw those parts. So shame is from an evolutionary perspective, kept you in your tribe. It kept you protected. So you hide those parts so you don't get rejected. But longer term, and we know we don't necessarily need to hold on to as much shame as we used to, because we're not necessarily going to get rejected. Or if we are getting rejected, it's probably a good thing, because we can survive and we can find other people to connect with. But generally, that letting go and sitting there with it allowed me to just kind of have this healthier narrative behind what's actually been happening. I think it's I think for me, from being like kind of I look for the evidence and stuff from a cognitive sense. I think from an emotional sense, it's just been really nice to know that not all the new age stuff is complete nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. And some of it, is based on sort of really ancient traditions.
Mm,
And often it's a very different way of looking at things, which
yeah.
actually may enable you to gain some clarity and
Mm.
perspective where perhaps the traditional way of looking at things won't always help with you with that. So, but it's
Well,
yeah, go on.
no, well, in the current world we live in, I think we maybe try to overanalyze our problems too much. We get into our thinking brain a little bit too much, and obviously it's good to have a healthy balance. Our thinking brain is there to help us plan the future. To focus on what we want, and it's good. But I think to sometimes the ability, or often we know our ability to think is dependent on our emotional state, because if we're full of emotions, we're lightly stressed, and that ability to think rationally and clearly about situations is going to be hindered. So clearing some of those emotions, not getting rid of, but being able to process them in a healthier way that letting go does, it allows us to think more clearly, and allows us to kind of never get rid of fear, but have a more healthy approach to fear, and other things like that. So
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. It's
yeah.
incredibly powerful. And what you mentioned earlier on about having this belief around articulating words is exactly what I had.
Mm.
And I was always concerned with my ability to communicate, articulate words, and just around communication. And I remember when you said this and I said this, and we both had that, and we're like, okay, let's do this together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder how many other people carry the same thing. This kind of belief around their ability with language, with words. What do you think?
I think words are so powerful, aren't they? They kind of basically give us a description of what's going on. It's how we communicate our experiences. But I think maybe through education or just how we're raised or whatever, many of us we struggle to articulate how we're actually feeling. We know with emotions that they call it emotional granularity. The more varied descriptors you have for the feelings you experience, generally the healthier people seem to be, and the better the solutions they tend to find for their circumstances. But I find that a lot of people, they don't know how to communicate, and I think part of that might be probably because of historically emotions have kind of been frowned upon, to the point of don't really talk about your emotions. From a resilience perspective, I know the old idea of resilience is you just got to get on with it. Just get on with it, kind of, and you see a lot of the people who are considered to be resilient kind of come from have kind of got a military background, and obviously getting on with it is great if you've got bullets being fired at your ass, right? You can't sit there and just think, oh, what am I feeling right now? You just have to get on with it. But, given that, mental health in the armed forces hasn't exactly got a great track record. We know that when it comes to being resilient and managing our emotions, just ignoring them and burying them isn't helping. So I think that plays a part in people not being able to experience how they're feeling, also to articulate themselves properly, because maybe we just don't know how. We've grown up with people who just shut up and don't talk about their problems. But now we are moving forward, and loads of people are open, especially about mental health. I think it's good that people are talking, and maybe we're going a bit too far the other way. But I think being able to articulate how you feel is really powerful, really powerful.
There's a huge shift for me, and I don't know if you've noticed it, but when I started on my inner journey, I was 26. I just started my business, and no one talked about emotions. No one talked about mental health. Everyone had this mask that they were wearing, and everyone pretended that they were okay. Now I know over those 20 years, it's shifted. And I'm just curious about your experience in that. When did you actually begin your inner journey?
So my inner journey began personally, probably, I'm trying to think what year we're in now. It's probably about 5, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, personally, and because despite my story was when I was a kid. Mum and dad divorced when I was 3. My mum then found herself in an abusive domestic relationship And I grew up witnessing lots of physical abuse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
By the age of 8, my mum was killed by my stepdad in the room next to her sleeping, and she was killed. So I was then taken over care.
You were next door.
Yeah, room next door. So my mum was killed in the room next door. Police came into my room at the time, took me out of bed. I remember being like, "What the hell's going on?" You know, wearing these really embarrassing Popeye pajamas. I mean, at 8, you don't really care, but like now I look back and think, I could have had worn something better, like Thundercats or something. Anyway, Popeye took me down to the police station. They told me there and in the police station, last thing I ever expected to experience. But my dad then took over the role of main carer. Now, my dad, in my opinion, did the best, but I think my dad had lots of issues, and his idea of raising was throw money at the situation, you know, throw money and don't talk about your problems, just bury them. So from an emotional perspective, all my emotions were, from a very young age, were kind of just taught to just shove them down. Be grateful for what you do have. This is why I have a little bit of issue when people always bound about gratitude, because there is a time and a place of gratitude. I don't care what anyone says. Anyway, so as I grew up, I just had all these emotions buried. And, you know, when I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I became a mental health nurse purely by chance. I literally got paid to do my training, and it was a steady career. It was good. And I enjoyed it. And I kind of found something that I was actually good at after a while when I stopped pissing around so much. I actually found I was pretty good. And anyway, I think living in that environment, working in that environment, in a way was another way that me pushing down all my emotions. Because what I was always doing was thinking, I've been through all this stuff, but look at all these people who've got like schizophrenia, bipolar type 1, personality disorders. I know I don't like the label that, but that's kind of what we use to diagnose certain people with certain presentations, eating disorders. I'm thinking, I'm okay. So therefore, I should never, ever go, you know, what, I don't need to even open up that can of, you know, that Pandora's box of everything I've been through. Just stuff it down. It'll be all right. But what was happening as I was going through those years was me probably becoming a bit of a people pleaser. Definitely. Actually, you know what? I was a massive people pleaser. I would do anything I could to calm situations down between people I love. I would literally say what I needed to say to keep the peace between people. Even if I tried, even those situations I tried to manage, where I tried to repair relationships with my sister and my dad or other people in my family, I just would shut it. I would just try and manage it as best I can. If I couldn't, I just shut down. But now I used to, and we come up with disguises, we come up with protective strategies for this. So for me, that would be, I just told myself I'm laid back, I don't get any problems. But when I got to about the age of 33, 34, I was owning my own house, and that was kind of, I thought, oh, this is great. And I had a fiance, and I thought, oh, you know what? I'm actually doing something well in my life. You know, I've achieved something that to most people might matter, but to me it mattered because I didn't think I could do anymore. I was a damaged kid, right? But then that all kind of fell away. And suddenly it was like, I had plans. I basically got to the point where I just thought, I don't want to be here anymore. Like,
as in on this planet.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
I remember just feeling like, look, my mum has been murdered. My dad, my relationship with my dad wasn't great, frosty at best. And to be honest, I've been people pleasing so much that I just overlooked how he'd actually been treating me and my sister. The person I loved at the time didn't want me. And I was just like, and a house, which was kind of like, oh, this is achievement. I've got a mortgage, I've got a house. But that was part of the relationship. So that was gone. And it was like, almost like, I just didn't want to be here. But at the time, I remember I was querying my career. You know, a lot of what I've seen in my mental health career is us look at people, look at their emotional problems, their problems that we all experienced every day. And we're literally, for a lot of them, sticking mental health labels on them, when actually the problems are with wider society and how people are kind of actually trying to adapt with these kind of ideals, wrong ideals that we're putting on people. So I was kind of looking at reading and stuff and looking at like, maybe what can we do differently with people? Do we have to give people diagnosis? Can we just not look at the situation and the environment they've come from and try and work with that rather than, oh, there's something wrong with you? And anyway, I was reading Viktor Frankl's book, and I just feel like, if there is something about divine timing, I think that was the book I was meant to read at that time, where I'm literally thinking, I'm trying to battle these thoughts of suicide. I'm thinking of ways to end my life, but then looking at my dog who's down by my side, going, oh, I don't know if I can leave you. So it's like it's torn all the time. And it said, and I've changed the word slightly, but he said, everything can be taken from you except your ability to choose how you respond, your ability to choose your own way. And I remember reading those words, and it just dawned on me that the life I've been living, the life that kind of got me to this point, was never a life I'd chosen. It was the only life because of what I'd experienced that I believed I could live.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I'm so passionate about the work I do, because I see it happen to so many people. You know, we refer to midlife crisis, and we look at people and go, look at them, they're doing stupid things, they're just having a midlife crisis. No, I actually think it's almost like you've been born again, and you've realized that you've created a life that wasn't what you ever wanted, but you've been socially conditioned to believe this is acceptable.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
But I was there at that moment. When I was there, I suddenly was like, okay, if this Viktor Frankl guy can like live in a concentration camp for 3 years where only 1 out of 26 people make it alive, I must be able to recover from what I've been through. Because as much as it was shit, like, and I'm not saying people should compare their trauma to others, because that might not be helpful, but it did put some perspective in it and make it, okay, I can do this. But now how am I going to do it? And it suddenly shone a massive light on everything that ever happened to me. Now, before I got into letting go, and I think this is really important, I did get into a lot of new age stuff. I think because I was so almost anti my job and mental health, I was thinking, I'm not sure a lot of the stuff we do does work. So I started reading like Abraham Hicks, Eckhart Tolle, all that sort of stuff. And I know it works for some, but I think I kind of got lost in this idea of forgiveness and positive vibes. So for a long while, it was kind of just echoed what I was already doing, really. It just like shovel the stuff down, pretend you've forgiven everyone, and just think of positive stuff. But as over time, I just realized that actually that wasn't helping either. I needed to go into this stuff. I needed to explore some of this stuff. And I'm not this, people don't need to misinterpret this as saying they need to go through every single bad thing that's ever happened to them. I know that's what a lot of these trauma people talk about. It's not always necessary. But for me, it was really important to go into that, to look at those moments, to look at, you know, one of the stories I told myself when my mum and dad broke up, and I had this vision of me when I was about 3 or 4. Could be completely created in my mind, but in my mind, it was a story that I kind of told myself, right? And I can just remember feeling like I'm at fault for them breaking up. Like, my mum doesn't want to stay with my dad because she doesn't love me enough. My dad doesn't want to stay with my mum because he doesn't love me enough. And it was like, oh my God. So this feeling of self-worth just carried on. And there's loads of little sections in my life where I've had to kind of unpick that and work on the story and release that emotion. But it wasn't until I started doing letting go that I kind of was able to kind of go there, really. Because I think all my life has been avoiding it. And even when I was trying to pick my pieces, pick the pieces of my life up and put them back together, I was still avoiding it through like a lot of this new age stuff. But letting go really helped. It was like, no, actually it's okay to go there, because actually and again, I don't know how much I believe in a lot of the new age stuff, but I do feel like if we're wanting to, let's say the words raise our vibration, I cringe when I say it because again, I hate it. But if we do want to do something like
that's something you need to let go of.
Yeah, but it's okay. For me, I think it's a load of, most of it's nonsense, but I do believe in spirituality. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But I feel like letting go has allowed me to release some of that tension that's freed me and made me feel just a kind of like lighter, I guess, from those things I was carrying that I probably could have put down a long while ago.
Yeah. And I want to just mention something that you brought up earlier. You said that when you started on the sort of the new age spirituality, that sort of Abraham Hicks, I think Eckhart Tolle is slightly different.
Yeah.
He's more like letting go. But I think what is really common is what they do is they get you to, they say, raise your vibration, change your thought pattern.
Yeah.
But it's extremely difficult to do if you haven't dealt with the underlying emotions, as anyone who's been on this journey has discovered.
Yeah.
You know, I started a mixture of different things, but I came across, you know, spiritual books and they were really powerful. And for me, they were very beneficial. But I found that I couldn't change the thought pattern Yeah, because the underlying emotional energy was still stuck. The trauma was still there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we have to really sort of communicate with people is it's not about pretending. And a lot of it feels like you're pretending. Yeah, you're pretending you're grateful, you're pretending you're raising your energy, but deep down you're just covering up what is really there.
Yeah. And I think that probably goes back to the narrative, like the old kind of CBT narrative. And we always the old kind of self-help, self-improvement stuff always says your thoughts, change your thoughts, change your life. But actually what we know now is actually your emotional state dictates how you think, so how your physiology is. So if you're absolutely fried, your ability, and you're exhausted and knackered, your ability to think clearly, for example, is hindered. You're struggling. You're literally your window of tolerance, you're at the top of it and you're about to flip. You're about to flip emotionally because there's so much stress in you. And so we know that actually it's emotional states, our physiology dictates how we think. But obviously, like with emotions, and obviously there is research, isn't there, that suggests, especially with anger, that actually those who believe to hold on to anger and repress or suppress that anger over years are more susceptible to mental health and physical health problems. But going back to that kind of think positively, be happy, change your thoughts. I just always used to, I remember when I was listening to Abraham Hicks, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's worked for some, and there are some probably helpful bits in it. It's not all complete nonsense. But I just used to remember listening. I went for a phase of like all the time listening to it when I wasn't at work. And I laugh at it now because it's quite funny. But I just remember thinking at the time, there's people who are going to these conferences, they've been going 5-6 years and like nothing's changed them. And all they're getting told is like, oh, when you get it, when you raise your vibration, you don't match, you haven't got that energetic match to what you're going on. I'm like thinking, I just think these people are a little bit deluded, to be honest. A little way. And there might be some truth to some of it, but I was thinking, God, you know what? Actually, I think it's the emotional states we need to work with people.
Yeah.
And
I
just
think
give space.
yeah.
Give space. It's not even necessarily working with it. Like, you know what it's like when you're sitting there doing letting go. You're not even trying to change it. You are just allowing it to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we need, space for everyone to allow it, because we live in such fast-paced lives now that people don't do it and they're getting tired and burnt out because they're not even able to sit there.
And then you can choose your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once the underlying energy has been dealt with, then the ability to watch and observe your thoughts is improved. And at that point, I think some of that work they talk about comes into being. Yeah, where you can actually, and I've found this for myself personally, that it takes tremendous amount of will either way to be able to deal with your stuff. So whether it's whether you're doing letting go or whether you're trying to change your thinking, it's the will that is the key. The will, the ability, like to have that energy to yes, I'm no longer going to be a victim, and you set that firm intention, and that can just be the start.
And I think it's really, really important in doing that again, going back to compassion and kind of supporting those old parts of you, that when you do that, there's going to be parts of you that are going to be really hesitant to go forward with that. And it's actually, a lot of the old kind of talk around dealing with that, maybe sometimes people refer to it as their inner critic or whatever. But those old parts that are hesitant to go in there are just trying to protect you because you've went through something where it's worked. So like when you set that intentions, it's important to like make sure you're supporting those other parts and saying, okay, how can we work together to do this? Can we give this a go? Because I think we can be really hard on ourselves. There's a lot of the problem is I find that we're hard on those older versions of ourselves. How often do we tell ourselves, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't done this. I wish I had done this differently. I should have done that. And we kind of have we end up beating ourselves up for our old versions of ourselves when actually everything we did at that time was the right thing to do because that's what felt right for us.
Yeah, and it was the best thing that we could have done. And I remember one thing that I heard it's a few years ago now, was that we are always doing our best. We cannot not do our best no matter what happens, because whatever decisions we make from the foundation of what we know.
Yeah.
And that's always our best. But we beat ourselves up. But it's the only choice we could have made. Otherwise, we would have made another choice.
Exactly. This is it. And the past really haunt us a lot of the times. And when we're talking about that, it's really important that, yes, okay, that applies to us, that applies to everyone. That doesn't mean we have to go around forgiving everyone and like excusing awful behavior. Don't have to think of Adolf Hitler and go, oh, you know, he's only doing his best, poor guy. You know, we don't have to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
But
It's
you know,
not.
we still hold people accountable, and that's what you have boundaries for.
Yeah,
But it's important to also recognize that people just don't do stuff for no people don't do this stuff for no reason. There generally is there's powerful emotional forces at play. There's societal forces at play. There's all this pressure on us to do things, and we're just doing our best to survive in the environment we're in at the time.
yeah, yeah. Do you know what I remember when I first met you, you're doing that speech
Yeah.
and it was on mental resilience and this guy, Alex, is an amazing speaker. And as you can probably tell, you know, the way he's speaking now, very articulate. No, but honestly, you know, you had the audience captivated with your story. And I thought it's such a powerful story. And now you go around speaking about this. So what kind of sort of impact do you feel that you've had? And moving on, what kind of impact would you like to have?
I mean, moving. I mean, obviously, the big dream, isn't it? Is to like just. I think for me, and I think for most people doing the sort of work we do, is just to help as many people as we can as possible. From a clinical perspective, what I believe is we see in a lot of this in a lot of the troubles we see with people with mental health and the increasing rates of mental health problems we're seeing is that through no fault of the individuals themselves, that maybe when people aren't taught resilience, they're not, and they're also not taught what it really means. Like the old idea of resilience is kind of it was just all about mindset, just crack on with things, like I said earlier. But actually, resilience is also about the environment and the supportive environment you found yourself in. So who's around you, who's supporting you. And that's why I had going to groups, and especially for men's mental health right now. So many people doing some amazing work with the groups they're setting up for people. But also it's about your physiology, which is where the emotion stuff comes into. What is the state of your nervous system right now? What kind of emotions do you need to kind of start to let go of and process? Not completely let go of forever. We're not going to await, anger, fear. These things never go away. But when we allow ourselves to release them a little bit, we allow ourselves to change how we can actually move forward with them and work with them rather than against us. But it's for me, it's like just helping, especially young people. It's helping people to create resilience, to create a better future for the world. Because we've got some amazing young people right now. We've got some amazing ideas. They kind of can see through all the nonsense that we've kind of seen in the society we live in. They're able to look at our politicians and go, these guys are idiots. And yet you've been voting them for years. And they're like, we need to change something here. And the only problem I see with them changing it isn't that they don't have great ideas and they can't do it. It's just maybe haven't been shown how to kind of build that resilience and we haven't necessarily create the supportive environments for them to necessarily be able to do that. Because I think if we can do that, and that's the work I do, and I do it with anyone, to be honest, because we can all do with being a little bit more resilient, I think. And by doing that, then we can create change in the world that we actually want to see, and not just giving rich people all the money that seems to happen.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah, and I think we want to be able to create a better world, obviously, without sounding too cliche.
Yeah,
We want to be able to create a world which is where it's a joy to live in, right? It's people are happy, people are excited. What they do comes from their heart, and people love to get up and work, or it wouldn't even be called work.
Well, an ideal world, yeah.
Yeah, but there's one thing that I did want to ask you as well is, you've worked in the traditional sort of sphere of health with
Yeah.
the NHS.
Yep.
Yeah. So you've worked for NHS. What do you feel needs to change and shift in the system, the old traditional system of mental health, in order to truly impact younger people, the younger generation, and impact everyone? Because for me, I have a little bit resistance to the old traditional model, because my father, he was a psychiatrist, and yet deep down he never dealt with his own trauma and stuff. He was trained, he had a obviously degree and doctorate, and yet deep down he was suffering. So what are your thoughts on that?
So in a nutshell, I'd say we need to stop telling people they're sick and realize that the society we live in and how we are told to live our lives is sick.
Mm.
Because I think that's the problem we see. And the problem with mental health, and especially the old psychiatry, and I'm very protective of mental health and psychiatry because I know it gets a bashing, usually from people who haven't got any idea of what it's like to work in there or the people who are working there. And generally people are what we consider to be trauma informed, or whatever lingo people want to use these days. But like people do care, but we've been raised psychiatry and general psychology over the years has kind of been like the problem lays at your feet. You're the problem. There's something wrong with you. Let's try and fix you. But actually, if we want to improve mental health for everyone, we need to look at how that works within the society. So people don't just get ill. Okay, maybe a couple of people do. Like, I'm not going to get rid of, there are genetic predispositions to certain mental illnesses. Sometimes you can be on a course of steroids, for example, for some kind of infection or whatever, and you develop a psychosis. Sometimes people can smoke a joint of cannabis when they're 13, 14 and would have a full-blown psychosis. Bipolar, we know is genetic, but generally most mental health problems are due to how society and what's going on around them is affecting them, not because they're not able to function in society. And I think what we really...
Yeah. So are we talking about creating new structures of society which help impact each individual?
100%. I mean, and then look at a really good thing to look at right now. And I know that people will say that money doesn't buy you happiness, but I generally think that's something rich people say. Because yes, although money will not make you happy, and we know that up to a certain level, degrees of happiness don't go much. I think it's about 70, 80 grand or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But it's something around that. Happiness doesn't generally improve. But the stress that people are under right now, especially in England, I mean, I don't know what's happening around the world, but in the UK right now, the cost of living crisis, the stress that is putting people under means they're not able to like think about how to look after their mental health because they're worried about, how am I going to pay my bills? Am I going to pay my electricity and gas?
Yeah.
If you've actually introduced a living wage, an actual living wage, which, enabled people to pay for that stuff, the stress would reduce. And literally people would be able to look after their mental health and contribute to society. This is what I don't get. Like society, we literally think, oh, let's give bankers, let's give them a bonus. Don't worry about the people on the street who can't pay for their bills. Don't worry about them. Let's give bankers bonuses because that will sort the economy out. No, if you get the working class, you get people in poverty, improve their lives. That's going to improve their outcomes because they're going to be less reliant on a health service that is overstretched.
I totally agree with you that. And on your point around money doesn't make you happy, wasn't it Arnold Schwarzenegger that said he said money doesn't make you happy. I'm just as happy when I as I had 40 million as when I had 8 million.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's a good quote. I mean, the only one I remember of him.
No, I think he was just joking around, but yeah.
Yeah.
But 100%. The systems and the structures that we create, they're only really suited for the elite few, where they benefit. And it seems that there's more and more people suffering and worrying about basic things that, in my opinion, and perhaps in yours, is that in our day and age, we shouldn't have to worry about. You shouldn't have to worry about how you're going to get the next money, where you're going to get the next money from to pay, for food or to look after your kids. Or it seems to me that this is such basic things that we should have this and we just work from our hearts, but we can't do that. We're working to survive. In a society that's meant to be advanced. And sorry, but I'm with you on this.
Yeah, and I'm not anti-capitalist. Like, I'm far from it. I think it's good that people have the opportunity to earn money and build business. But the way capitalism works in a good way, and from a good way from a mental health perspective, is that the people at the top earn the money and it filters down to the people at the bottom, so they can have a good living and they can get by. But it just seems like if we're to change how we work with mental health, addiction, emotional health, just quality of lives, then we need to be looking at society, what we are doing for people and the structures we've got in place that support people. I know in my career, since I've changed, the amount of And since I've been in my career, the amount of things that changed, in particular to what's available to people in the community. Like from a mental health perspective, the services we provide, especially the community services, and this isn't the clinician's fault, but you've got overworked clinicians who get to see their patients maybe the best once a week, and some people monthly, longer than that. And all they do is checking in. Are they? And if they're not trying to kill themselves or someone else, it's like, okay, we'll go see the next person. It's not, let's look at how we can actually help them to thrive in the community. How can we make them connect with other people and build relationships? That's what we need to be doing. And now that's not the clinician's fault. That's because we live in a society that's just, the services are all wrong and they're not funded enough, and that no one's willing. This is a big change we need to create, because you can't do it overnight. But when politics in particular, it's not long term, is it? How can I get the right folks to get me into power next time? And this is how we need to look at it. Mental health needs to change. Emotional health needs to change. The addiction space needs to change. And we need to look at what we can do for people in society. That's the answer.
Every system needs to change. The schooling system, the banking system, the political system. I think there's going to be huge shifts at some point. They're all going to. I personally think they're not going to last for very long. I know that's maybe a bit crazy saying that, but I think at some point that all of the systems that have underpinned humanity in the way of doing things will start to collapse, because they're unsustainable. They're not, they're not based on truth. They're not based for everyone's benefits.
And I think that's why young people are so amazing. Like they can see it all. And maybe
they can.
And I think that's probably, social media gets a bad rap. And yes, we know there's lots of bad things about social media, but maybe being plugged in and listening to people to talk freely, to express their opinions freely and explore new ideas has made young people more switched on us, because they're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't right. Why are we living like this? This is wrong, And I know like people like Greta Thunberg gets a hard time from like boomers and stuff like that, because they're like, oh, look, she doesn't know what she's on about. But we need more people like that. We need people who are passionate about making the world a better place. And I honestly believe that if we can get these people with great ideas and support them, get the environments around them, and get people like me to kind of give them the skills and the tools to when life knocks them down, which it will do, any goal you try and achieve in life, whether it's something small or big, there's going to be failures, there's going to be setbacks, maybe there's going to be heartbreak, there's going to be rejection, all these sort of things. Learning how to respond to those things and is going to help you get to that place you want to get to. And also, like, one thing is recognizing that those bad things are still going to happen. One of the another problem we have, I see, when it comes to creating a better world, is maybe we do have this idealistic view of it, and we believe there's some maybe magical path out there that is free from pain. One of the most freeing things for me is recognizing I know there's some bad shit going to happen at some point again in my life, and it's going to be hard, but I know I can deal with it. I think this is kind of what we need to teach people, because that's the way you create the change. Look at the people who've done big things in their life. They've had so much resistance. Look at Rosa Parks. And when she got on that bus that time, bloody hell, it wasn't like, oh, everyone's going to, all these white people are going to be, yeah, get on the bus, we support you. Like, oh, look at the abuse she got for what she did. But she did it. And I think that's kind of what we need to remind people. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that letting go is about, isn't it? It's about your ability to face your fears and to move on in the direction of what you believe is right.
Yeah.
Follow your heart, regardless of what the fear, whatever fear exists. Yeah. And fear is there. You feel into it. You sit with it. You let it go, and now you're more courageous. Now you're able to follow the path which betters, whether it's your community, whether it's your family, whether it's yourself, whether it's the world.
And even if we just take it down a notch and just look at our individual lives, like, just the little things we want to do. So, for the relationships we want, how many people I know with my mum, and I often look back and think, you had me now, go back to when my mum was going through the divorce with my dad, and I have 100% belief that she just had so much shame and really had so much doubt that's what's got her stuck in that kind of abusive relationship that cost her life.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully people will I never want that to happen to anyone again, but generally when our emotional needs aren't met in healthy ways, we find to meet them in unhealthy ways. And I think if we can recognize that help people to realize that just because someone rejects you doesn't mean that you have to settle for someone less than that person, for example. And hopefully we can help people to be happier and create lives that keep them happier. You know, failure, setbacks we face in life can literally destroy our lives if we don't know how to respond to them. And people aren't taught how to respond to them. They literally decide, you know, they get a grade at
That's where you
school.
come along.
Well, exactly. That's why I'm so passionate about doing it. Like, how many people get a grade? Say you got a D at, well, I don't know what, I can't remember what they use for GCSEs now, but for me it was like A, B, C, D, E. Say you got a D. How many people go into with the rest of their life, go into a mindset, imagining saying they're a D student for the rest of their life?
Yeah.
When you know there's areas in your life you're going to be an A star, right? Just because I got a D in geography, and geography was boring. It's like sucked. I remember doing a course on coastal erosion.
It's always the teacher though, isn't it?
Oh, mate, you know what? I loved it when it was all about volcanoes and earthquakes. I was well excited. But then as soon as it got coastal erosion and I can't remember those icicles that hang down and go up. I can't remember the names of them now. I was like, this is boring. But anyway, like for the rest of because of my GCSE scores, I remember just going around thinking, well, that's the level I'm at for the rest of my life. But when you channel it into something you want, you're passionate about, you can become an A star. You know, this is what we need to tell people, like, and this as well. Like when it comes to resilience.
Yeah, the one thing when you mentioned education, for me, when my daughter was first born, the one thing that I researched a lot about education, I read a lot of books, and at one point I wanted to start up a school because I felt that there was something wrong with the educational system when a child who goes into the system and loves to learn, loves to grasp knowledge, but then when they come out, they absolutely hate everything about school. Yeah, there's something inherently wrong with that.
Yeah,
and I think the old system needs to be let go of, and something new in its place.
Well,
which doesn't have coastal erosion on its syllabus.
Exactly. I mean, unless you're into coastal erosion, unless that's what you get off to that. I mean, but I definitely didn't. But this is it. Like, I think a lot of what I believe we see when it comes to neurodivergence and stuff is actually we're trying to fit them into this box of how they should be, and actually that's the education system isn't right for loads of people. It wasn't right for me. I was too gobby and had loads of issues, and I didn't want to.
I can believe that.
Yeah. Well, at least but yeah, the good thing about it was a negative thing, and now it's a positive because I get paid to use them to shout off my gob. But
yeah,
it's just that that's what we see. Like, what we should recognize everyone's different. People have different talents and gifts. And okay, I recognize, how do you make an education system that tailors everyone's individual needs? That's a big question, and I don't know how possible it is. But I think we need to, instead of telling people, oh, you're not good at school, we need to find what they are good at and channel that. You know, I believe everyone has a gift, not in the sense of like you're going to be the next Gandhi or something like that, but like we have talents and skills that we can use. And when we encourage people to use that, and rather than try to force them to be like things that they're not really good at or want to be good at, then that would, again, also create a better world. Now, hopefully, at the moment, it seems everyone wants to be an influencer, but I don't know. We don't want everyone to be an influencer, but, you know, maybe we could fight when maybe it comes back to the community. If we can also get a community mindset around this, rather than an individualistic mindset, which we do live in a very individualistic world right now. I think if we can think more community and then get people to use their skills and talents to make better community, we'll have a better world. But again, it's a bit of an idealistic view, but I think that's the answer. In the meantime,
me and you are similar like that. We're quite idealistic in that viewpoint. Like, you know, some of my friends used to say, "You're living in a dreamland if you think that's going to happen." Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's why I think. Okay, so taking it back again, for me now, what can you do now? Well, let's make the people with good ideas more resilient, so they can implement those ideas. And let's help people right now to learn skills of resilience so they can better protect their mental health. And build lives that protect their mental health. So like, they're not one of the many people I saw when they got to their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, who are like, fuck, how did I end up here? You know, and then you go, oh, it's probably because, you know, you believe this was the path you had to follow because you were conditioned this way. Maybe there's a little bit of trauma, maybe. But actually, you know, you, like Viktor Frankl says, you get to choose how you respond. You get to choose your own way. Let's tell you now, and let's get that embedded in your mind now. Let's get that embedded in your physiology and emotionally. And then you can, when setbacks come, which they will, you can always remember, oh, I still get to go after that punk I want to be with, or I still get to pursue that career I want to go down. You know, ultimately the last decision comes with me, and that's what we need to remember, tell people, I think. So
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's gone everywhere. But so how can people get hold of you?
Oh, follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. I don't do TikTok dances, but I put my videos on there. So it's at the Alex J Williams is my handle on all three platforms. And also you just drop me an email. You'll find me all my details and social media. So yeah.
Yeah, there'll be links in the description below. Once I sort that out. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me in this discussion, Lego. I hope you enjoyed yourself as well, and I'd love to have you back actually. And
Definitely.
we've been doing Letting Go together, and maybe we can take the audience through a process of
Yeah.
do it together, or
Love to. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love chatting with you as always, mate. So it's good to chew the fat and put the world to rights.
yeah. So everyone, thank you very much for joining us. We're so delighted that you could have done that today, and I'll see you in the next one.